Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to our November 1st council meeting. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everybody. Matt, want to start us off with a roll call?
Councilor Hickerson.
Here.
West.
Here.
Savage.
Here.
Vitolo.
Here.
Halter.
Here.
Robinson.
Here.
Demus.
Here.
Sadi.
Here.
Mayor Como.
Here. Councilors, first order of business, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the city council meeting held October 18th, 2022.
So moved, Your Honor.
Do I have a motion by Councilman Hickerson? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Batolo. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're going to move on to presentations and proclamations. We have two proclamations tonight, one Lung Cancer Awareness Month and one Epilepsy Awareness Month. And the proclamation for Lung Cancer Awareness Month reads, whereas lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death among men and women in the United States and Wyoming, accounting for more deaths than colon cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer combined. And according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were 1,502 new lung cancer cases and 1,077 deaths because of lung cancer between 2015 and 2019 in Wyoming. And the 5-year survival rate for localized lung cancer is 60%, yet only 24% of lung cancers are diagnosed at this stage. And lung cancer screenings for high-risk individuals using low-dose computed tomography could lead to the earlier detection of lung cancer and save more lives. As a result, this screening reduces mortality rates by 20% when compared to screening by chest X-ray in the National Lung Screening Trial, and reduces the risk of death at 10 years by 24% in men and 33% in women. And funding for lung cancer research trails far behind funding for research of many other cancers, and additionally, research is needed for early diagnosis, screening, and treatment for lung cancer, as well as lung cancer affecting women and lung cancer health disparities. And lung cancer incidence is decreasing twice as fast in men as it is in women. Each year, more women die from lung cancer. By 2035, more women will die from lung cancer than men. And African Americans have the highest lung cancer incidence and mortality of all races, and disparities in lung cancer screening, diagnosis, treatment, and mortality are well characterized among African Americans and other racial minorities. And lung cancer in never smokers is the 7th leading cause of cancer-related death and accounts for 17,000 to 26,000 deaths in the U.S. every year. 60 to 70% of never smokers diagnosed with lung cancer are women, and the proportion of lung cancers diagnosed in never smokers is increasing in the U.S. And organizations working in the Rock Springs community, such as the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative and Women's Lung Cancer Forum, are committed to education regarding lung cancer screening, and working to increase lung cancer screening rates in Rock Springs. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Timothy A. Como, Mayor of the City of Rock Springs, do hereby declare the week of November 2022 to be Lung Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Rock Springs, and recognize the need for research in lung cancer affecting women and lung cancer health disparities. And I encourage all citizens to learn about lung cancer and early detection through lung cancer screening. So don't forget that lung cancer can be brought on to those individuals that are non-smokers as well. So get your screening and do your part to make sure that if there are issues, it's caught early. We have a second proclamation for Epilepsy Awareness Month, which reads, Whereas epilepsy is a neurological condition characterized by recurrent, unprovoked seizures. And epilepsy and seizures affect over 3 million people across the United States, including nearly 65,000 children and adults in the states of Colorado and Wyoming diagnosed with reoccurring seizures. And epilepsy is the third most common neurological disorder among adults in the United States behind Alzheimer's disease and stroke. And 10% of the American population will experience a seizure in their lifetime. 3% will develop epilepsy by age 75, and epilepsy cannot currently be cured, though many of those diagnosed with epilepsy can control their seizures with modern medicine and surgical techniques. The National Epilepsy Awareness Month is designed to increase the awareness of epilepsy and to encourage Americans to join the movement to end the stigma often associated with epilepsy. And now therefore be it resolved that I, Timothy A. Como, Mayor of the City of Rock Springs, do hereby declare the month of November 2022 to be Epilepsy Awareness Month in the City of Rock Springs, and I encourage the community to participate in the effort to increase awareness, educate Rock Springs residents about epilepsy, and lend support to people with epilepsy and their families in order to improve their quality of life. Could we note a change on that first one before we send it out? Thanks for allowing that time for the proclamations. Council, next item on our agenda is the public hearing section from the Housing Authority. We have one item under public hearings, and that's a public hearing regarding the flat rental amounts for each public housing unit, which will take action under Resolution 2022-152. Is there anyone here tonight wishing to speak in regards to this public hearing? Hearing none, we're going to move on to petitions. I would ask, is there anyone here tonight wishing to address the city council on any issue whatsoever? This is your time to get up, address the council, come to the podium, state your name. There's a sign-up sheet. Make sure that you jot your name down and a phone number. If by chance we need to get a hold of you, we can. And let us know what you're here for. While Mr. Wanacott is filling out the sign-up sheet, I'm just recognize the good Representative Clark Stiff has joined us. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's always good when you come into our council chambers with ideas on how to secure more funding for our community. Go ahead, Bill.
My name is Bill Wanacott. I'm a Rock Springs native, 73 years. You were elected to approve ordinances that benefit our community. I am asking you to repeal Ordinance 2021-13, Section 3545, feeding of wildlife. This ordinance has no value. It does nothing to solve the issue. It only harms our wildlife, causes negative financial impact to our businesses, and heartache for our wildlife managers. Wildlife is part of our heritage and should be appreciated and cared for. Why doesn't Rock Springs become a community known to appreciate and care for its wildlife? We have the resources to minimize wildlife impact while enjoying a valuable asset from our heritage. These resources can be better utilized to educate our community to benefit from our wildlife. Do you have any questions?
Councilors, any questions?
No.
I caution you to seriously repeal this ordinance, for you are individually accountable for your vote. Public record lists your name. I am not a social media person, but if one starving baby deer gets its head blown off, or a starving deer is found on the wrong property owner, you will probably get politically crucified.
Mr. Wanacott, is your intention on ordinance 3-545 to allow people to feed the deer?
Yes. I think that we should take any way to assist our wildlife in order to live in our community. We don't have the year-round habitat to support our wildlife. So individually, I think it's good for citizens to be able to assist these deer in order to get them through that hardship. You have a backyard that's got an apple tree or something like that, you should be able to put those apples out into an alleyway in order to help these deer through the wintertime, not to be receiving a warning that you will be arrested and fined if you proceed with that. I personally have been taking care of deer for more than 7 years. I got tired of picking them up on my property, starved and dead, or ending up bombing game and fish in order to come put these animals down. My wife and I personally assisted Game and Fish last winter with the putting down of 2 deer, one in the park below our house and one in our backyard. And I don't think that any citizen of this community should be subjected to that kind of abuse, especially when we can take this and turn it into a positive thing for our own community. The state of Wyoming, look what they do for our deer and other wildlife. They invest millions of dollars putting overpasses on our highways in order to allow the migration of wildlife to get through there without getting run over. That has a good benefit that it protects our citizens as well from car crashes. We have communities like Jackson, Wyoming, that utilizes their wildlife in order to stimulate their economy. They've got an elk refuge there that they feed their wildlife during the wintertime. They used the opportunity to cooperate with the Boy Scouts in order to derive the funding in order to feed those through the winter. And how many of you have ridden the sled up at Jackson in order to stimulate their economy? Any other question there?
Just one clarification, Mr. Wanacott. Ordinance 2021-13-3545B specifically states the term supplemental feed includes but is not limited to human food, including garbage, domestic pet food, pellet, forage, feed, and hay, salts or mineral supplements, grain, or other food, but does not include planted or naturally grown materials. So that being said, if you want to plant a garden, an apple tree, and a deer goes in the backyard and eats an apple, I don't think where that applies.
But you cannot move that feed
Yeah, I see
to
what
another location in order
Right.
to assist those wildlife.
Right. And that-
Nor, in my case, I don't have the habitat at my yard unless the deer come in and get into my wife's flower garden, and then they're welcome to it. But they individually
Hold on,
select.
you say they're welcome to it. The wife's probably over there with a rake.
No, that's not the case. And if there are individuals in this community that have issues with those deer, this is where our resources come in, to where we can educate those people to plant deer resistant
Right.
in those areas. And then we can also utilize those same people to assist their deer. I personally don't have that, so I buy feed for these deer. I've been doing it for years.
Your
And
Honor.
it's a great cost, but the value of that to me is well worth the cost.
Councilman Robinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think it was about a month ago, we had a group of folks in that were probably the polar opposite of your view as far as the deer go. I'm sorry if you can't hear me very well. I've been a little bit sick for the last few days. So there is a group of people who are anti-deer. And one of the concerns that they had was that the deer would get into their backyard and eat their flowers. I've given up on growing flowers up to a certain point because then the deer come and, mow them down for me. So, but I agree. I think that if you wanted to plant something that, the deer wanted to come eat, I think that's probably, the best route to go. I mean, it's kind of what I do, not intentionally, but.
Of the ordinance back when it was developed.
But I feel you. I mean, I enjoy seeing the deer out in my front yard, even if they are eating my flowers. I enjoy, any wildlife that happens to come by. So I get what you're saying, but, most ordinances are created because it did create a problem for somebody. And unfortunately, you weren't here to discuss your points of view that I'm aware of when this ordinance was coming up.
I wasn't aware of the ordinance until the animal control person was in my basement giving me this warning. I had no idea that this ordinance existed. It wasn't publicized in any way that I had access to.
Well, Mr. Wanacott, because of the many complaints that the city council had over individuals that were feeding deer and the deer population in the city, we did make contact with Game and Fish. They came and gave a presentation. The presentation ended with leaving it up to the city to designate certain city employees or Lord forbid, citizens that would, as you stated, kill deer. And we did not feel that was a good situation. So there is no ordinance that would allow us to move forward to allow whether it's animal control, police officers, or any other citizen to discharge a firearm and kill a deer. But the ordinance at that time when it was developed was just that if it was natural food, a garden, whatever it was, then so be it. But the supplements of grain and the like was something that would not be allowed. And that had to do with other varmints that were coming in, whether it be skunks or it be coyotes or whatever. I think the discussion back then was basically a natural garden was something that a deer could partake of and wouldn't have an effect of a bull sitting out in an alleyway, which we had numerous, which is probably about the same time you received that. We issued several up in the Prairie Edition and the like that had numerous troughs, if you will, bowls of food, water and the like. So I don't see any support to repeal the original ordinance 3-545. We would have easily 20 times the amount of people coming in here to hang us. But by all means, if you want to continue to feed in the deer, a garden, and them going into your yard and eating apples off of a tree is one thing. It's just providing food sources, moving food sources and providing troughs full of food. That was the issue when the ordinance was originally created.
Your Honor,
Councilman West.
if I could too, Game and Fish gave us some information at that time too, that a lot of the feed that people were putting out was sickly for the deer, and that it was food that offered little nutritional value that they had a difficult time digesting. So that's why you see some of the language within that ordinance that doesn't necessarily pertain to the natural grown garden, but some of the items that were being left out, they were actually finding were harmful for the animals. I just saw an article today, I believe it was on Wild4 News, talking about pumpkins and making sure you throw them away because those are very sickly for deer in neighborhoods. So that's where some of that language came from as well.
What about educating our people about doing that? You know,
Mr. Wanacott, you're going to have to get behind the microphone if you could, please. It's a public meeting.
I haven't seen that there's any action taken in order to educate our public on what we actually need to do, what is harmful and what isn't harmful. Limiting our ability to grow this is not going to help the deer in the wintertime. From November through green up, which is typically April, these deer really don't have any food source. So if you had a garden and you allowed the deer to come through that, by November, it's already gone. So they need supplemental feed. It's exactly the same principle as you have in Jackson, why they feed on the feed grounds. Those elk cannot sustain themselves during the winter without supplemental feeding. They have a high quality feed that they pay through the auction of the antlers up there in order to support those thousands of elk that are on that refuge.
Well, and that makes good point, Bill, that the feed grounds is one thing. If you had 4,500 elk roaming the neighborhoods in Jackson Hole, you might see a different scenario. The city of Rock Springs doesn't have a designated area to feed deer, and we've seen more and more deer, as we well know, over the last years because of the drought and like. They do come to town, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but there's ways that they can get their supplements without being fed pellets, hay, which we know by information that the Game and Fish left is mostly toxic to those animals. And the Game and Fish did give reference to their website that kind of tells people what type of vegetation and the like is best consumed by deer, and why certain items such as pumpkins and the like are not so good for deer. But I don't see any interest by the city council in actually repealing the old ordinance 2021-13-3-545, other than for individuals to take it upon themselves in those times of a growing season to actually supply a garden to allow those deer to eat. Wintertime, you're exactly right. It's a struggle, and it's probably why we're seeing more deer in the residential areas, is because of less vegetation out in the hills. But that being said, I can tell you, I see many nicer buck deer in our neighborhood than I see when I go out in the hills. So they seem to be doing okay.
Well, it's going to be a temporary fix, though. The more of these citations that you issue, the harder it's going to become on those deer in order to do it. I'll tell you a classic example. Typically, in the wintertime, well, throughout the year, I feed the deer 4 tons of supplemental feed. 4 tons that I personally buy. I maintain water 365 days a year for those deer to come. You eliminate me alone, I have counted up to 32 deer at one time on my property, utilizing that resource. You take that away, and I guarantee you that the amount of dead deer that you find in this community is going to go up. I'm not the only person that's doing it. You eliminate the apples here, you eliminate that over there. Sooner or later, you are going to have a negative effect on the health of our deer in this community. And then you're going to have some real problems. You reduce the health of these deer, then they're more susceptible to disease and whatever that a weakened deer can have. And that's exactly why I want you to repeal this ordinance and allow us to go back to help these deer. I've got deer that have been on my property from fawns to 7 years old. These deer have names. I can tell you exactly who they are, and have the history of them. If I find an antler on my property, it has the date it was shed and the deer that it came from. That's the kind of commitment that I put into this wildlife resource. I'm a retired person, and I'll tell you that there is not one day that I don't spend hours enjoying these deer. I don't want to start finding them dead on my property again.
Well, I don't disagree with that, Bill, but like I said, we've been through this, we probably have 10 to 1 of your neighbors that don't agree
Okay.
with that.
How did you derive at that number? I never received a survey in the mail or any other way that asked if I was pro or against these deer in the city or whatever. All you had was a group of people that come in that filed complaints. How many people that were pro deer, pro wildlife, did not come in here to complain?
That's why we always say it's nice when people do participate in the discussion, because we spend a lot of time having the Game and Fish come in. We knew Green River had this issue. How did they tackle it? Had the Game and Fish give us a great presentation on what the city could do at that time. And basically it consisted of, okay, well, you can kill the deer, you just have to take it upon yourself. And there was no interest in moving forward with allowing the city employees, the animal control, to kill a deer inside the city limits. So, a deer is a wild animal, and they forage out in the wild, and nature takes its course. But when they come into the city, they definitely cause each side. I would say I love to see deer. I love to hunt. And I get what you're saying, but the ordinance back in that day took into a lot of consideration of the comments and the information that was brought forward. And when the ordinance was written, that's exactly why they said, and I still see deer today, lilacs and the like, that usually a lot of those that have leaves throughout the early winter months, they forage on that stuff. But it does become an issue for them when the cold winter hits, and they get used to easy food, and that's where they're going to stay. And they don't have any intention of going outside of the corporate city limits to forage for food like they used to.
Those deer were born here.
Yeah.
They have no reason to leave the city. If you spend any time outside the city limits, you can see that there is no habitat that's out there. The amount of overgrazing that occurs from livestock as well as other animals, there's no place for them to go.
Well, Mr. Wanacott, I'm only one vote and 9 members of the city council. If there's a motion to repeal ordinance 2021-13, section 3-545, I'm sure it will come up in the form of a motion. Council, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Hickerson.
I have one more thing to add. When the Game and Fish came and talked to us, they also explained that with the deer being born and raised here, they have no incentive to go out of town. So even if there is forage out there for them, it's easier for them to stay in, because easiest life's going to be lazy life, right? And all animals choose to live that way. So if they're getting fed in city limits, there's no need for them to exit city limits. And that's what they're trying to do, is get the deer out of the city so they're not causing problems for the residents who don't enjoy them. So there's nothing that what you're saying coincides with what the Game and Fish recommended we do. And they have studies, and they've got all sorts of data to support their side of the story.
They have no interest in the city deer because it derives no revenue source for them. They're nothing but a nuisance to them, because I call them and tell them that I've got a crippled deer down in the Kiwanis Park, and they have to dedicate the time to come shoot it and dispose of the body. These deer need food, water, and shelter. Where are they going to find that anywhere close to the city limits? It's not possible. So these deer are going to die. You're going to have your fawns that have barely built any food reserves during the summer months. They're going to be the first ones to perish. You're going to have your bucks that are drained down from the rut. They're going to be the second ones to die. You know, we haven't done any studies in this community. We don't know how many deer we have. We don't know what the buck to doe ratios are. We don't know what the fawn recruitment is, how many fawns are does and how many are bucks. We have no idea what the population is. I bet there's not one council person that could tell me how many deer die in this city every year. These are statistics. These are resources that we need to know in order to be able to manage these animals, in order to help them. And that's our job as concerned citizens, as a community, to love and care for these animals. We have to find the best way. Maybe me buying 4 tons of corn a year to feed these deer is not the best way to go. But it's a temporary solution until we find and we improve on the perfect way in order to manage these wild animals. They're not going to go away. It's going to be a constant problem for us to address. We haven't done one thing to reduce speed limits or to put signs up that says we have wildlife crossing in these areas. We have actually done nothing for this wildlife. Have we ever used our Parks Department to create any habitat or anything else in order to help these deer?
Well,
No,
Bill,
no.
hold
All
on.
we've done is ignore the problem and looked at people that were complaining, and then we made a resolution or a ordinance that doesn't benefit anyone.
But deer do eat grass.
They're actually a browser, and what we're forcing them to do is to use the parks and everything else. They're not really a grazer. They're a browser.
But they do eat grass in the winter. They
Deer
do.
eat a lot of different things, and they have to have a lot of that. But again, it's right back to the what I said is these deer don't have the habitat to support them during the wintertime.
Councilman Savage, or Batolo? I'm sorry.
Sir, I'm 59 years old, and I was born and raised here. And I don't remember when I was a young kid, the deer being in our town like they are now. So the deer, to me, are thriving. And they're causing more of an issue with safety and property destruction than ever before. So I don't agree with your argument that they are going to perish or they're in peril here, because the populations are growing.
Do we need to address that or not? If it is growing, should we create better circumstances for them to thrive?
Bill, you're going to have to get to the microphone. This meeting's on live.
We've had more people here against them than we have had for them. Okay, so we have to look at our numbers and say, hey, look, we've got 10 to 1, 5 to 1, whatever that number is, there's more against than there is for.
Those are the people that complained. Does that represent our community? And that's the people that you're supposed to represent. Have you polled your wards and asked those people what?
Yes,
What ward do you live in?
4.
I live in 4.
Ward 4.
You've never been at my door. I've never received a questionnaire or anything that asked me.
3-1 when this issue came up, when the Game and Fish came. So it was about 3-1 against. I like to see them here too, but not everybody knows how to feed them and manage this wildlife properly.
Well, the biggest concern I can tell you, budget-wise, we don't have a budget that would allow us to manage deer within the corporate city limits. That, as we discussed before, is a game and fish item, of which we agree if it's not bringing any revenue, they may not even want to undertake such a position. But
The budget is not any kind of a concern. I mean, we have organizations. You've got the Mule Deer Foundation, you got Elk Foundations, you've got all of these organizations that derive funding in order to do that. You have the ability to make it on your water bill a little checkbox there that you can make donations in order to protect these wildlife. When I buy my hunting licenses online, there's a box that you check right there. Do you want to put money into the overpasses in order to protect these deer? We haven't looked at any funding resources. Have you asked for any donations from the public or whatever?
But where does it stop, Mr. Wanacott? You know, we're driven by complaints. And to answer your question in regards to where was the information, whenever we draft ordinances, it goes through 3 readings. That's advertised, that's 3 meetings, that's both sides of the story. That's how we handle business here. You try and find, you know, some middle ground that appeases both sides, because no matter what the subject is, we can never win up here. And it's not necessarily our job to do Game and Fish's job. It is our job to keep the community safe. And a lot of the complaints that were driven from these conversations were safety. And deer that were attacking, you know, other dogs, children in parks, you know, what have you. But as everyone has stated, it was heavily more on the against side of things than it was in favor of it. Then we had an additional meeting with Game and Fish, who came and talked about the disposing of the deer. So there's been ample opportunities, and this ordinance that you're referring to was passed over a year ago. So
Your
I
Honor.
understand where you're coming from, but I don't feel like it's the job of the city to manage the deer population.
Councilman Robinson?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add, when the state of Wyoming does a traffic study, essentially, and they do the math, whenever a police officer, highway patrolman, sheriff's deputy does a crash report, it identifies if it was animal related, if it was deer, whatever type of animal it may be. And using that information, they're able to find how many millions and millions of dollars are lost financially annually through collisions with animals. And so while I agree, I love seeing the deer too, but if we created an oasis for all of the wildlife to come in, it does create more of a burden for law enforcement. It's just as far as the aspect of more deer on the road means more accidents, more cops are going to be taking crash reports, and some of those accidents end up being fatalities for the human occupants of the vehicle as well, especially some of the higher speed crashes. So that's one of the other aspects that we have to look at when you look at creating some type of a safe haven for the animals. I mean, I realize it kind of looks like we're doing nothing, but by doing nothing, we are trying to minimize the number of animals that are in the city limits and let them go back out to their natural habitat. And I get it. I get that, many of them are born here, so this is their natural habitat. But we want to try to eliminate that a little bit as well, because, especially with winter coming on, it's harder to stop for the deer. The number of people that are involved in crashes because they're trying to swerve to keep from hitting a deer, and then they hit somebody else. And I think I was taught in driver's ed that if there's a deer in the middle of the road, hit it. You don't want to swerve and take a chance of hitting somebody else, and it usually causes more damage if you don't. And while that's tragic for the deer, it's, survival for us. So that's all I've got, Your Honor.
If I could real quick. When I look at this, I look at it more of a natural perspective. Deer have been around for thousands of years. They're natural migrators. So during the seasons, they migrate. They've got migration paths all over. So we've kind of done a disservice in disrupting that. The very first deer who came here were born somewhere else, but they came here because there was food, and then they stayed. But we're disrupting that migration pattern. And then when we do feed them things such as corn, which is high in carbohydrates, and they eat too fast, it does actually increase the pH in the blood and can hurt or even kill the deer from acidosis. So there's a
That's
number
not true.
well, it's all over from all kinds of wildlife sources
Well,
online here.
That's a bunch of propaganda because I actually feed corn.
Yeah,
I've fed the same deer for 7 years,
It causes-
and I've never seen any problem with those deer at all. They
Boundary
claim that
improves.
you shouldn't feed them alfalfa either, and then you go up to Farson and you can get your depredation tags and
the
what do
point
they
is
live
that I'm
on?
trying to make is they're natural migrators. There's migration paths that they take all the time. They migrated here for a reason because there is food. If that food source starts to dwindle, they're going to migrate somewhere else as well. They've been around for thousands of years. They've survived, and they're going to continue to survive. The issue is we're disrupting that natural instinct of that from them, and in providing them supplements in that. I mean, to me, it's not the complaints. It's all natural. I mean, I go back to natural basics. It's deer are deer. Let them be deer. Don't trap them here. Don't keep them here. Don't feed them here, and create this safe haven because it doesn't do anybody any good. But you know, there's a lot of information out here about what supplements and that will do to deer. And I don't feel it's all propaganda because there's a lot of different organizations from various states who are Michigan Sportsman, deerhunting.com, Buck Manager, Wildlife Management, North Carolina, and New Jersey, on all over the place. So there are issues that are there. We're just, and it's not our job to control the deer migration or the deer and create a habitat for them in the city. So I don't know. I don't know where to go from here other
Well,
than
I
I think we've
think
done
the
what we can
answer's
do.
in the ordinance itself, and I think as far as education, the ordinance explains that well. Grow more naturally planted or naturally growing materials that may last throughout the winter. Grow more apple trees that deer could come in. Leave your gates open, your fences down, and let deer come in and forage through the winter until the summer comes. But the ordinance allows that, and I think the answer is simply in the ordinance. I don't think there's any intention, unless I hear otherwise, to repeal the ordinance as it exists, because at that time there was a lot of input put in the ordinance just to allow those items that were natural and allow those deer to eat natural items than being supplemented by pellets or corn or alfalfa or any other items that at that time also was found to be maybe toxic to some of the animals. Grow a garden, keep your fence down. I think the ordinance fits. Council, unless you have other reservations. Bill, I appreciate your commitment to wildlife. I know you've been a hunter for many, many years. And this has been an issue for many, many years. And I would have to agree with Councilor Zadi. Deer have been around for thousands of years. And I believe they're going to be around for thousands of years. And they're going to do what deer do. They're going to find food one way or another, whether someone's feeding them or they're looking around to find feed. I know in dead winter, I have deer in my backyard eating my grass, and I leave them alone. I like to see them. I know they need to eat. They drink water out of the backyard. I have a koi pond. They drink out of the backyard. So, but that's just something natural that they do. They hear the water. They know there's grass there. Garnet Park, I would imagine we probably have 35 head of deer down there that pretty much stay there year-round. And through the winter, they bed down in the alley right there and in the park. Pretty much any park around the city of Rock Springs, I can tell you can go and there's going to be deer bedded down. And in the wintertime, they're going to be scraping and they're going to be eating grass at that time. whatever leaves are left on the trees. They run around in the alleyways. They forage on lilacs or whatever they can get, and they're going to continue to be deer.
So I have no motion to repeal this ordinance.
Counselors? No interest in repealing ordinance 2021-13, section 3545.
Well, I thank you for this opportunity because now my conscience is cleared. I have done everything that I can to promote something that I love, and it's on you now. It's not on me. So I hope you can live with this decision. I just gave you an opportunity to be informed from a different perspective and to make an alternate decision. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Wanacott. We're still under petitions. Is there any others that wish to address the city council? Please bring some happiness to our group.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Clark Stith, House District 48. Just here to give a kind of a legislative interim update to you, tell you things that you probably already know. I serve as the legislative liaison to the State Loan and Investment Board, and among other things, it's administering a significant amount of money of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that have been allocated but not yet spent. So the city, I believe, applied during the first round $50 million for water and sewer projects. I think that was decided upon by SLIB in October. There's a second round, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of, I'm sure you already are. There's a second round of $50 million where water and sewer projects have lower priority. But it's $50 million spread over the entire state, which is not a lot of money when you spread it over 100 communities. But it does present potential opportunity for application. The application process will likely open sometime this year in 2022, but the deadline will not be until at least late January of 2023. It has to be ARPA eligible, which means that somehow it needs to address the adverse economic effects of the pandemic. So that causal tie can be a bit difficult. I do not have any specific project to recommend to you. I just leave that to you to decide. But if there were one of your projects that doesn't get approved on the sixth penny ballot that you may think has an economic impact, whether that's the ice rink or the irrigation at the golf course or the First Security Bank building, some project, just wanted to alert you to have you and everybody thinking about that to meet the city's deadline. Because it's only $50 million for the whole state, my guess would be that a project of kind of moderate size is more likely to be approved than a really large project. So
Probably 1 to 3.
That's what I'm thinking. $1 million to $3 million might be a sweet spot for an application, perhaps. So
Well, Representative Stith, we are very much aware of it and following it, and we're having that discussion right now about what may be viable for the city of Rock Springs in that range. Maybe would allow us to remove something from the specific purpose tax proposition, but we haven't made a discussion or a determination at this point, just because, one, how it fits and meets the requirements versus what's available and whether that could address those issues that we have.
And then two other short items. One is kind of the Wyoming's fiscal picture. It's very volatile. It's kind of like a roller coaster. A couple of years ago, we were in dire straits with budget shortfalls projected. As of this last Joint Appropriations Committee meeting this last week with the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group report, the state's savings account, so to speak, will be at its highest figure ever. So it's going to be about $2 billion in the so-called rainy day account, which is a kind of savings account that acts like a financial shock absorber for the state. In addition, the K-12 school funding deficit that we've been talking about for years and years and years has, through high oil and gas prices, disappeared, and now they're projecting a surplus for the first time in a very long time. So anyway, that's just kind of the, maybe here 6 months from now saying, well, now our revenues are projected to be down again. But in any event, if you have thoughts about, the legislature this coming session, we'll probably be talking about, well, if we have some extra revenue, where should it go, right? Should it go into savings? Should it go into more programs? But there, I think the city's input is important. And then finally, as you know, on the ballot Tuesday is Constitutional Amendment A, which would allow local communities reserve accounts if they so chose, and if the legislature adopts a statute authorizing it, to invest those funds perhaps in a pooled fashion so that over the long run you'd get a better return on investment rather than just investing in treasuries. But, of course, in this environment, maybe treasury bonds are the better investment. But anyway, I think Constitutional Amendment A is a tool that might provide some flexibility for local governments going forward with their reserve funds, so you get a higher total return in the long run. So
Yeah.
those are the three things that I could think of. But I'm just here basically to say hello and ask if you have any comments or input.
Well, we definitely appreciate you keeping us up to breast on the condition of our legislative, financial, and upcoming opportunities for us. We have had discussions on each and every one of those items, including Amendment A, which is a bit scary to us in a sense that maybe smaller communities may just throw everything in the pot, and then where do they go to when they've lost all of their money? In my own feelings, I think that's similar to what had occurred during the Fire Plan A scenario, where we ended up forking out a pretty good chunk of money to make up for investments that weren't so well monitored, you might say.
That's true, Mr. Mayor. As you're painfully aware, the city will be writing a check for about $90,000 a year for the next 20 years to take care of Fire Plan, Pension Plan A.
So anyway, very interesting topics, and we do appreciate everything that you do down there for us. We got a lot of many projects that I hope will continue here with the city of Rock Springs, and we sure will need your help, and we sure appreciate your connection with the SLIB board and the past lobbying you've done on behalf of our community. And Councilman Patolo?
With the ARPA funds, would you suggest we do projects that lean more towards economic development to bring money into the city? Would that be a suggestion for us to narrow down our list?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Batolo, that would make sense to me. And then you need to somehow, as part of the application, say this is addressing adverse effects of the pandemic. Somehow you have to make that causal tie with a straight face. Right.
Yeah.
And I think you won't be alone. I think there'll be a lot of applications that will be having very attenuated arguments.
Well, if you don't buy the ticket, I guess you're never going to win, but we definitely have to find something, and we've had those discussions.
Your Honor, I have a question.
Councilman Zadi?
We're starting to address massage therapists and human trafficking.
Oh, there goes the conversation.
Is there any, now, has this been brought up in the past with legislature? I think it has, maybe last session. Do you see that moving forward? Do you see any traction from that, and how they may address that on a state level?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Zadi, there was a bill last year that addressed human trafficking that sort of died, got caught up in wondering whether that particular bill would have helped or hurt, basically. And I'm really sort of proud of you all for taking this issue head on. You're actually doing something about it here locally with your proposed ordinance. I think that's a really good step in the right direction. I think it's an issue that the state probably should take a little more seriously. And when I served on Judiciary Committee, I know we had hearings about it, but we didn't really, to be honest, take a lot of action on it. So I think I'm really happy to see what the city here is doing.
I was just curious, if we're doing this and the state does something, how is that going to impact what we're doing? And it doesn't sound like there's really
not that I'm aware of. It could be that other legislators are working on things, but I'm not aware of any specific human trafficking legislation that's been proposed. But we'll see what the general session brings.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Stitt. Any other questions for Clark? Nice to see you. Thanks for coming down, and we appreciate the information.
Thank you very much.
Still under petitions. Anyone wishing to address the council? Hearing none, I'm going to close the petition section of our agenda and move on to officers and staff reports. Councilors, we have one item, the financial report summary, September 2022. I'd entertain a motion to approve the officer and staff reports and place on file.
So moved, Your Honor.
We do have a motion by the president. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Hickerson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's going to move us on to the council committee and board reports. Councilors, we have item number 1, a joint powers telecom board meeting minutes of September 22nd, 2022. And item number 2, the joint powers combined communications board meeting minutes of September 26th, 2022. I would ask, are there any other council committee or board reports?
Your Honor.
Councilman Zadi.
Yes, I just want to update the council on the human trafficking ordinance and massage therapy. We will be meeting, the committee that we formed last meeting, we will be meeting tomorrow night at 5:30 in the downstairs meeting room. So it'll be our first meeting to discuss possible wording changes in that, in the proposed ordinances. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Councilman Zadi. With that being said, I'd entertain a motion to approve the council committee and board reports as mentioned.
So moved, Your Honor.
We do have a motion by Councilor Batolo. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Demus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's going to move us on to correspondence. Councilors, we have 2 items under correspondence. Unless there are questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the correspondence and place on file.
So moved, Your Honor.
We do have a motion by Councilor Zadi. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Batolo. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to the bills and claims section of our agenda, councilors. Item number 1 is the bills and claims for November 1st, 2022. What's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus?
I make a motion to approve the bills and claims for November 1st, 2022.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve the bills and claims for November 1st, 2022. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hickerson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And item number 2, the salaries for October 21st, 2022. What's your flavor?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus?
I make a motion to approve the salaries for October 21st, 2022.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve the salaries for October 21st, 2022. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's called by Councilor Robinson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to new business items under our agenda. We have 3 items. The first being a request from Engineering and Operations and Public Services Department for permission to fill a vacant water reclamation facility operator 1 position. Councilor, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus?
I make a motion to approve this request.
We do have a motion to approve this request. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Councilor Robinson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 2 is a request from the Police Department for permission to bid the lease agreement or purchase of police fleet vehicles. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Batolo.
I have a quick question on this. Matt, we talked not too long ago about, have we talked to the county about how they're doing it? Have you had a chance to talk to Marty about that?
Your Honor, Councilman Batolo, I have talked to her the last time I met with her about it, but I've reached out since and we just haven't had a chance to connect.
Okay.
But we will, I will reach out again after, if this request is approved.
Councilman Batolo, is that a form of a motion?
Yes.
We do have a motion to approve this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Demus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 3 is a request from Lou's Incorporated for permission to transfer their liquor license to Green River to cater the Shishi Jam Service Awards banquet on November 11th, 2022, from 4 p.m. to midnight at the Expedition Island Pavilion. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Hickerson.
I move to approve this request.
We do have a motion to honor this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's called by Councilor Batolo. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, councilors, we're going to move on to resolutions on our agenda. We have 6 resolutions. The first resolution be Resolution 2022-148, which was tabled on 10/18/22. What's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Mr. President,
I would move that we untable Resolution 2022-148.
Council, we do have a motion to remove Resolution 2022-148 from the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. With that, councilors, Resolution 2022-148.
A resolution accepting and approving an addendum to the collective labor agreement between the International Union of United Mine Workers of America and the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and directing Timothy A. Como as mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Matthew L. McBurnett as city clerk of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, to execute said addendum on behalf of said city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Mr. President.
it was mentioned yesterday in a staff meeting that they're still continuing to work on this and that they'll likely redo the whole thing, which will require a new agreement and a new resolution. So it was suggested that we defeat this. And with that, I would move to approve Resolution 2022-148.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, we do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-148. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's called by Councilor Hickerson. Roll call.
Counselor Savage,
No.
Batolo,
No.
Halter,
No.
Robinson,
No.
Demus,
No.
Zadi,
No.
Hickerson,
No.
West,
No.
Mayor Como.
No. And I do appreciate Chief Erspamer and UMWA President Lester Mock for getting together and working to find common ground, and we'll present the city attorney with new language of which we'll take up at our next meeting. Next, resolution number 2 from the Housing Authority, Resolution 2022-152.
A resolution authorizing Timothy A. Como, acting in his capacity as chairman of the Rock Springs Housing Board, to approve a revision to the authority's flat rent schedule for units in its HUD-assisted public housing program.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Savage.
I move to approve Resolution 2022-152.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-152. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called by Councilor Batolo. Roll call.
Counselor Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 3, also from the Housing Authority, Resolution 2022-153.
A resolution authorizing Timothy A. Como, acting in his capacity as chairman of the Rock Springs Housing Board, to approve a Breeze Premier agreement with Yardi Systems, Inc.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Savage.
I move to approve Resolution 2022-153.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-153. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called by Councilor Demus. Roll call.
Counselor Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
No.
Batolo,
Just kidding.
Is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. April almost stuck to the roof. Item number 4, also from the Housing Authority, Resolution 2022-154.
A resolution authorizing Timothy A. Como in his capacity as chairman of the board for the Rock Springs Housing Authority to execute a proposal for the renewal of commercial liability and commercial property insurance coverage provided by the HAI Group for the Rock Springs Housing and Community Development Agency.
Counselors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor.
Councilman, I'm afraid to ask.
Savage.
Savage.
Your Honor, I move to approve Resolution 2022-154.
Council, we do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-154. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's called by Councilor Batolo. Roll call.
Counselor Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes, and just a little bit of a shout out to the Housing Authority, April, Matt, for all the work you do to keep our Housing Authority in line. We appreciate the efforts and continued efforts in trying to find funding and improve our housing opportunities for this community. Thank you very much. Item number 5, Resolution 2022-155.
A resolution accepting and approving and enforcing underage drinking prevention contract from the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chief of Police Association.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Halter?
move to approve 2022-155.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-155. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called by Councilor Batolo. Roll call.
Counselor Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. And item number 6, Resolution 2022-156.
A resolution accepting and approving a shelter agreement between the City of Rock Springs and Hills Pet Nutrition Sales, Inc., and authorizing Timothy A. Como as mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Matthew L. McBurnett as city clerk of the City of Rock Springs to execute said agreement on behalf of said city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-156.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-156. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Robinson. Roll call.
Counselor Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter, Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Council, this is going to move us on to the ordinance section of our agenda, of which we have 2 ordinances that were tabled at our October 18th meeting on second reading coming up. So with that ordinance, 2022-13, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman West.
another discussion at staff, but also with Counselor Zadi and Demus's work on the committee. The recommendation has been that we move to leave ordinance 2022-13 on the table.
Councilor, we do have a motion to allow ordinance 2022-13 to remain on the table. Do we have a second? Second. Second's been called. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? With that, item number 2, ordinance 2022-14.
Your Honor,
Mr. President.
same order of business here with moving to keep, ordinance 2022-14 on the table.
Councilors, we do have a motion to allow ordinance 2022-14 to remain on the table. Do we have a second? Second. Second's been called. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And we look forward to the work that the committee will be doing in hopes of bringing new language for this council's consideration on November 15th. And councilors, with no further business to come before the city council, this meeting is adjourned.